the goal of the business is to make money.
You're a single owner. So
Yes.
how do you get it done?
It requires wearing a couple different hats and understanding that you will be wearing these different hats. How I stay smart now is really social media and looking at a lot of the things that are coming out. So recently I started getting into AI and looking at the courses that are available for AI and how you can utilize AI in your businesses and just going through and doing those things.
How do you sell?
That's $1 million question. Finding the right person to have that discussion with is what assists with that.
What's next for you?
So what's next is...
Welcome to FYGHT Talk. My name is Christian Young. Welcome to FYGHT Talk. My name is Christian Young. All in my head. Today, we're going to talk with a professional services firm leader who houses all of the key knowledge about his business in his head. And we'll talk a bit about the challenges of being a sole proprietor in that space. We'll also talk about how he markets and sells and some of the interesting ways in which he teams with other people to get the job done. I think it'll be a really interesting experience to understand his perspective as a sole proprietor of a technology consulting firm and really dive into some of the factors that you would think would be difficult but can be surprisingly easy, such as staying up to date on what's happening in the industry today. So join us as we go through things that are all in his head. Thank you for joining us today. I have Stephen Hunte, a director at Agile Perspective, with us today. Hi, Stephen. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. So before we kind of get started, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what Agile Perspective is?
I certainly can. So Agile Perspective is a management consulting firm. What we focus on is IT strategy and business process development. So helping you understand how to utilize your technology and processes to further increase the efficiencies within your business.
So as a professional services firm, how have you been able to effectively adjust in kind of the changing landscape of business today?
So what I have, or my value, or my take on this is that the business landscape is really the same. We're just calling it different names. The fundamental objective of a business hasn't changed. As we know, if you start a business, the goal of the business is to make money. How you do that hasn't really changed because what your business was designed to do, it's still doing. Now, what has changed is how willing people are to spend money to accomplish that task. But if I can show you how to be more efficient in doing that task, where you'd get more value out of doing it, I feel that most businesses are happy to have that conversation with you on, here's how I can do exactly what I'm doing, because I don't want to take away and tell you to pivot and do something else. No, let's take what you're doing and figure out how we can get better at doing it.
Now, you're a single owner. So
Yes.
how do you get it done? How do you make sure that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed?
So it is not an easy task, but it does require some planning. And it requires wearing a couple different hats and understanding that you will be wearing these different hats, and you have to look at it from different lenses. Sometimes you have to take a step back. You know, when you were in school, they told you put the paper down and come back and read it as if you didn't write it. You kind of have to do that, and it's not a trivial task to do because, well, I wrote it. I know what I meant, and I know what the intent was. I kind of have to turn that off and go back and read it and say, well, if I was sitting on the other side of this agreement, what would I want to see? What would make me happy in receiving this? I was like, well, because there's a technical yes, I said I was going to give you a document and you have a document versus, well, this document was supposed to give me the ability to do X, Y, and Z. So now, does it give me the ability to do X, Y, and Z, or is it just a nice plaque that I can put up on the wall to say I have a document? So it's sitting through and thinking through that and then getting help. There are times where I have to utilize friends and family and say, hey, read this and tell me what you think. Now, depending on what the deliverable is, you can't always do that because there may be some NDAs and there are some clauses in contracts. But if you can put that hat on to say, I don't know what this is it clear? And read it as if it was. I learned a technique for that while I was working. And it really was, what are all the questions that could possibly be asked when you get this? And did you answer all of those questions? And you have to account for questions that are stupid also. Like, I have given you a document. What is a document? Like, so it's not really stupid, but you have to make sure that you are addressing those concerns also. And then you go into the technical where it's like, so I said I was going to do A through X. What is A through X? And did I actually deliver A through X? And it requires you to say, well, no, not from my side did I deliver it, but from the other side of the person receiving it. One, did they know they got it? And two, are they happy with what they got? So just writing it down and going through the process and making a checklist and going, okay, well, I know there's a lot of things. And this is when the admin stuff becomes very tedious because you're like, okay, well, I know what I have to do, but nobody wants to go through a checklist. I'm like, man, I could pay somebody else to go through this checklist. Sometimes it requires you to pay somebody else to go through the checklist because you wrote the checklist, you know what its intent is, and then it's just proving it. When you go through that exercise of having to explain it to someone who's not in the process, it makes it a lot more clear to you. Okay, well, this wasn't that easy to deliver. This was harder to deliver. This document covered X, Y, and Z bases. So you explain it as if you were explaining it to your mom who has no idea about what you're doing so that your mom can read it. And even if she doesn't know what's in the document, but she can go, okay, well, this ticks and ties with that. And you just go through it in that manner. And so I learned that one in college where I knew that I knew a topic if I could explain it to my mother who had no idea about engineering.
Okay. So you've worked at firms before in your corporate life and all of that. And
Yes.
I know, and I have as well. And as a part of that, there's a strong focus on, kind of staying current via CEs, CPEs, whatever you want to call them. How do you stay smart now?
So how I stay smart now is really social media and looking at a lot of the things that are coming out. So recently I started getting into AI and looking at the courses that are available for AI and how you can utilize AI in your businesses and just going through and doing those things. As new software comes out, so I am a technologist. I like technology, but I like to figure out, how does this work? How can you use this? What's it good for? So in that respect, I'll dive a little bit deeper than so ServiceNow has this new module. I was like, well, what is this module used for? What can it integrate with? And looking at those types of things help, where you're just building up it's a muscle and you have to use it. Looking at how things are integrated and how they work, having some intellectual curiosity about them, definitely serves me later on in the long run, where you're going through different things and going, oh, well, I've heard about this. How can we evaluate that? What are the metrics for that? So in my world, it's a lot about technology. So looking at what technology is available and how people are using them versus how they're being sold, because most technology is sold as a tool that can do everything. And while it may do some of those things amazingly well, anytime somebody tells you that something can do everything, be wary. It's like if you were a chef. I also like to cook. So if you were a chef, then someone tried to sell you a knife and said, hey, there's this meat cleaver, but you can cut everything with it. Look, it cuts bread, it cuts meat, it can even cut glass. And you're like, first, how did you find out that it could cut glass? Because I don't know why you want to cut glass with a knife, but that's neither here nor there. Why would I use this knife for everything? They have specialty knives when they say, well, here's the glass knife. Don't know why you need that, but here's the bread knife. Bread and glass are probably not two things you need to cut together. So similarly, software it works well too. Look at the use cases and try to use the natural good uses for them, because over my career, I've seen that it's the off-brand uses of technology that cost the most and also cause the most issues. Whereas if you try to use the technology out of the box mostly, you end up with the best use cases for it.
So when you're thinking about your business and, the back office, what does your team look like? Because like when I say team, I mean, typically in a lot of the discussions I've been having, there's been a very strong use case for certain vendors. What does your team look like?
Over time, we developed a flexible team of consultants that have different experiences in different areas. So I've created or curated a team of experts where I have experts in networking, experts in desktop services, experts in security. And as we go through the process, I'll just bring in the experts. I will never tell you that I know everything. I know enough to know when you need to talk to these experts. And I'll bring in the expert and say, hey, here's a case of, and I'll gather enough information because, as I said, I'm a technologist. I also understand the business case and business uses and can translate from business to technology, because that's the difference in many of the use cases, is that you have a very strong business case for what you want, but you have no understanding of the technology behind how it works. So being able to play in both worlds, I can say, okay, well, you have this business case and here's the technology behind how that works. Here's what you need to do. And is it an easy lift? Because what I have found is many companies that I have spoken with already possess the technology to accomplish what it is that they want to accomplish. They just don't know how to use it. So particularly dealing with small businesses. So when you paid for things that you don't know you can use, so you don't use them, and then you go and pay for something else to do the thing you wanted to do. And it's like, so you wanted email and you paid Microsoft for email. But when you paid Microsoft for email, Microsoft said, in addition to email, you have to buy all of these licenses for all of our other stuff too. And now you decide that you want to do a SharePoint site. And you're like, well, if I had this landing page for what I could send my employees to, this would be great. And I'm like, from a technology side, I'm like, that's just a SharePoint site. We can create that SharePoint site and we can use the same access that you have that you created for your emails to give people access to that. But you don't know that you have that ability, and you're going, yeah, we're going to go to Google. We're going to create a Google page for everything. And I'm sitting here like, but why would you do that? You already have this thing that you paid for that you can use, and you don't have to do anything different. That's where my expertise comes in, where it's, let's see what you can do with what you have and how we can make what you have work better, and think about the future with that.
Sales, professional service sales. I know one of the questions that I get a lot is around how to do that, because, there's a lot of people who are putting their little stake in the ground and saying, I'm about to go and just consult, be it freelance, you know, all those different ways. How do you sell?
That's $1 million question. Finding the right person to have that discussion with is what assists with that. And it's a long process to find the right person to talk to. And it varies company to company, which is what also makes it challenging. But I have found success once I find the right person. The hard part is finding the right person. And there's two different people that you have to find in order to get that done. First, you have to find the person who has the actual pain point. So if something's not working, the person that uses it would typically be the first person to know. The second person that you have to find is the person who's paying for it. Because if the person that's using it and the person that's paying for it are two different people, there's normally a mismatch because the person paying for it doesn't want to pay more. But it's not working for the people that are using it. So you have to find that partnership or figure out where the two parties are partnered. Because if the person that's using it says this is great and the person that's paying for it says this sucks, you'll typically get something new that's not being used. If you have the person that's using it that says this sucks and the person that's paying for it that says it's great, you end up in the same scenario of they're paying for something that they're not using, but they're confused as to why it's not working. So you have to get those two parties aligned, and that's where I have found success in selling, is making sure that you have both of those parties as stakeholders on the project. Once you can find both of those parties, it becomes a lot easier to sell, particularly if they agree.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to have a professional services firm but doesn't like selling?
Find somebody for that. So over time, I have found that there are people who like to sell and they absolutely detest delivering anything that they sell. The same way there are people who like to deliver things and detest selling. Find a partner. Find someone who likes to sell, who can talk to the people, who understands the vision of what you're trying to deliver, and partner with that person. They don't necessarily have to be an owner in your company. They can just be your salesman. But they have to understand what it is that you're trying to deliver. And if you are a salesperson, you can actually start a company, but you have to have a very solid idea of what you're trying to sell and then find people that can deliver that. So there's no exclusion on it. And it's also an evolving process. So if you can sell and deliver, then what you do when you start doesn't mean you have to continue to do it. So you'd have to figure out where you want to evolve your role to if you are selling and delivering so that you can do the one that you're better suited to do or that you have more passion behind.
How do you market?
Well, it is a lot of word of mouth, and getting out and meeting the people. So going to different diversity conferences when they existed, going out to talk to entrepreneurs and being in classes where they're learning how to be entrepreneurs. So getting to the people who need your assistance before they need your assistance is one way to do that, where you're teaching them what they need to look for. So I've done some classes with, Atlanta, I forget the name. But they're entrepreneurial incubators. So currently right now I'm working with the Russell Center for Innovation on a artificial intelligence project, which for manufacturing, where we are going around the state of Georgia and helping them to understand how artificial intelligence can be utilized in manufacturing specifically. And as you start talking to these entrepreneurs, as you have professional services to offer, you can say, hey, in addition to this base level of knowledge, if you'd like someone to assist in bringing this to your company, we can help with that.
How do you instill trust in your product when there's a lot of people out there who are selling a bag of goods?
It's really the conversation and then your past performance. So as I said, some of it is word of mouth, where once you do a good job, you have the people that you did a good job for talk about how you did the job and what you were doing. So you have to make sure you go back and reach out to those people that you did good work for and get those testimonials. Sometimes it's just telling them, hey, look, I had this additional service. So here's what we did for you. Maybe you might need us in the future if you do this additional service. Can you talk to a couple people if I have references or I need a reference? Is it okay if I have someone call you? It's kind of like when you were in school and you needed that recommendation for college. You got to go find your favorite teachers and ask them. Make sure you're asking those questions and that people are willing to do that as you're moving through the process so that you have a line of people that are set up to do that. Sometimes it requires you to do some pro bono work where you may not make your normal rate for doing it, but you just assisted in solving the problem. So that it's building your brand so that what you are known for is delivering good work.
So one of the things that you mentioned was pro bono work. And I think that there's a lot of firms or people, not necessarily firms, but people who struggle with the concept of pricing. How do you price?
So, and we've learned through trial and error that completely free does not necessarily translate to it's being used. So when I say pro bono, from my standpoint, it is what I had done is figured out what it would take to cover my cost at a base level. And that is my pro bono work, where I'm just saying, well, this will cover the cost, particularly if I have to bring in other partners. This is what will cover that cost so that everybody is on an even playing field. And that is what I'll charge versus the margins that I would need for a successful business. So I won't charge you all of the margins. So it's not that I'm profiting from your business, but it's a break even. When I had done the completely pro bono, where it's like, oh yeah, I'll come in and I can help you do this project. I will spend the time and it'll be at my expense. Later on, I found that the product that I delivered wasn't used. And it was kind of just like, oh yeah, this is great. We're just going to sit it on a shelf. And you're like, but I put blood, sweat, and tears into this for you to use it. And I needed you to use it so that you could tell other people how good I was. But if you just put it on a shelf, that defeated the whole point. So we started that we're going to charge you a base level where it's going to be a break even. And what we find is when people have some skin in the game, they tend to utilize it because they had to pay something for it. They understand that they're not paying anywhere near what market rate would be for it, but they will still use it. And as they start to use it, because you did a good job, they can be a testimonial for you because they're like, oh, well, we use this and here's the percentage of savings that we got. Here's how more efficient we got. Here is the benefit to us from using this product that we got. And we need to call you back because there's some other things that we have that we need to get done. So that's how I start with pricing is I look at the cost to do it to me and say, okay, if I'm going to do this as a investment, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to take on all of the cost of doing this for you. I'm going to figure it out so that it's a break even. And then anything that I do after will include a pricing where it's a profit level. So you have to determine what's your profit level? What's the profit that you want? Some of that is company structure and how lean you are and how much you're charging for your own time. How much are you charging for the overhead time that you have to utilize to set up the project? So we had talked a little earlier about all of the admin stuff that has to go on in the background for a project to be done. So you have to account for that time also. When you're doing pro bono work, you can say, okay, I'll eat my admin time. But if you were actually charging for a project, No, you need to include that time too, because that's part of delivering the project. You'll find that if you don't include that, you're going to erode your margins that you thought you were getting just from the admin time alone of figuring out what's necessary to accomplish the task that you have to accomplish.
Last question before I ask you for your socials. I was going to say, and I'm going to ask for them. But last question is, what's next for you?
So what's next is expansion. So right now we're looking at expansion into other countries where some of the services can be replicated and figuring out how do you grow that expansion. Then it's also some new areas where there are some new technologies that are coming out or new software that's coming out through open source and utilizing AI and how people integrate that into their daily tasks that I think would allow for a lot more efficiencies. So I'd say early on in my career, we were looking at things like robotic process automation. And I think that we have hit the time where that is really ready to grow and explode for not just large companies, but smaller companies, where you can utilize a lot of those technologies to avoid having to hire another person to accomplish something. You can literally teach your machine to do some of the things and give you the alerts that you need. Now, it does require a mindset shift for you have to determine what are those things that you need. And a lot of small companies and solopreneurs are so used to doing things that it's hard to step away from. So I like to use easy examples like bakers. So if you were baking cakes and you were used to tasting those cakes, you know exactly what you're tasting the cakes to get. You know exactly your process. But when you're going from making 100 cakes to getting that order for 1,000 cakes or that order for 10,000 cakes, there is no way for you to taste 10,000 cakes. You have to know what you were doing. Now, you can get other people to taste 10,000 cakes, or you can create the processes on the front end so that you get the results on the back end. So that's the way that I've looked at what's next is figuring out how to help those people who are in desperate need, but don't even know that they need it.
So then now we get to the good part. How can people get a hold of you?
So you can get a hold of me via our website, which is agileperspective.com. Either there, my email is SHUNTE. There is an E on the end of Hunt. It's decorative, but this is there. So SHUNTE@anagileperspective.com.
Thank you.
You're welcome.